Can you guys hear me? Oh, this one's better. It's less echo, right? Or no? Or maybe it's just me. Yeah, so I almost want to go home after that, right? Because it's not going to get any better. So anyways, when I wanted to submit a paper to BSides, I thought, you know what? We do a lot of really cool stuff in security, but I do think that we can do things a little bit better. And so we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that better. And I think some of the challenges that we've had in the industry as a whole is really around this point product type approach, right? Especially in security. It's complex. There's lots of vendors and products and cool stuff out there. So I'm going to talk about maybe taking a little step back and looking at this holistically and some of the value you might end up getting out of that. So we'll talk about who can benefit from this session real quick, right? To make sure that we got the right people in the room, which I know we do. Industry challenges. So some fun facts around some things that I picked up along the way through social media or whatever, but I find that they're certainly interesting. The point product approach, kind of a walkthrough. I know we've got a diverse set of people here. Some people may have been in the industry for a very long time and know the weeds, and then we've got some people that may not know all the components that make up what one would call an architecture or solution stack. And then finally, what we'll do is we'll go into the architectural approach, how you can use this in your own organization, and then a complete walkthrough of that. So, are you guys ready? Yeah? It's exciting, isn't it? Look at all you guys. So who's this for? Well, it could be red team, right? If you're on the red team side and you're compromising and looking to expose some vulnerabilities within the system, it's probably not a bad idea to truly understand how some of this is put together, right? Blue team, obviously on the defense side, this certainly would play a major role into it, right? Because this is exactly what you're doing. You're taking all the knowledge you get from multiple teams and building out a defense or a defense strategy or maybe hopefully some type of architecture right around security. And so I saw this. There are a couple of credits here for individuals that come out with this. But everybody's probably heard about the red team, right? Who here is from the red side? Anybody? Red team? Nobody wants to put their hands up? Is it the camera? Are you nervous? One person? All right. Well, anyways, this is the cool, fun job, right? Because you get to attack stuff and maybe break things and find holes in product and solution sets, right? How many people here are on the blue team? Actually, their role is 100% security. Oh, interesting. How many people are network security or system security or a combination? Okay, that's probably the biggest number. The rest of you guys, why are you here? I'm actually now curious. Is this even the right building? Maybe not. So anyways, so there's red and blue, so attack and defend, and then you've got purple, right? And purple, this individual, Daniel, is kind of argued that, purple team, or what you see, a combination of orange and green teams, are really not teams. They're more or less subsets of maybe what red and or blue team, they come together, right? And they create what it is called purple, which is not really a team, or maybe it is. I don't know. I don't care, really. But you've got this new one at the top called yellow, which is really around building the actual solution stack that you want to build. And then you've got some orange and green. And again, that depends on whether you're learning from the attacker or the defender, right? But either or, anybody in any one of those areas, or even the people that aren't in security or IT that are here, can benefit from this, right? So this part I like because I think it's a little bit of fun, but if cybercrime was a country, it'd be the 13th largest GDP. So first thing I pick up from that is there's a lot of money to be made on that side, right? 2015 cyber attacks came more profitable than the drug trade. That's awesome, because now we have a direct career path for drug dealers, right? Because they never had, they were kind of stuck in the same job, doing the same thing all the time, and now they can, yeah, maybe not. Sextortion, spam, phishing, and crypto scams increased by 28%, right? So make sure you cover your mic, however your camera, whatever, right? You don't want to Because the adversary knows, right? They want you to pay, so they're going to find ways to make you pay. And if they expose a nice screenshot that they captured of you doing something in front of a computer, I'm not saying that's what happens in front of a computer, but it could, right? You just don't want to cover the cam, please, right? 60% of small companies, if they do suffer a compromise, they're out of business in 6 months. It's over. You're not going to survive, right? And I don't know, I travel specifically Western Canada, and I have companies all the time saying, really, I don't think anybody's going to compromise us. We're so small, right? We're a small insurance company, and no, 100%. That's what they're going after. They're going after the little one. They're taking everything they can, and then they're going to leverage that trusted relationship that you might have with some larger organization and use that as their pivot, right? So it doesn't matter the size. There's data. Data is the new gold, right? Or new oil, right? Everything's all about data. 2018, cybercrime generated $1.5 trillion in profit. 1.5 trillion. It's a pretty good paycheck, right? So it's not going to go away, right? There's lots of money to be made, and we keep adding and adding and adding capabilities. When we do that, we continue to increase our attack surface, right? 2017, 80% of breaches are from phishing or credential theft. Email's still the number one vector for threats. Email, right? Who's clicking that link? Who clicks the link when they get an email? Yeah, only one honest person in the room. Okay, I shouldn't say that out loud. No, but I think most people do. And so recently I had an experience where I'm ready to do a session in Vancouver. I'm with a colleague of mine. We're having breakfast. You know, I'm already annoyed that I'm up early maybe. I don't know. But it wasn't starting good. And I get an email. And the email says, you must use your PTO by the end of the quarter or you're going to lose it. And I'm like, or personal time off, just in case somebody uses a different term. And I'm like, it's like 2 weeks before the quarter's ending. And I've got like 3 weeks. So who sends that, right? So it had a link in it, right? I was annoyed. So I just read it real quick and I forwarded it off to my manager. I said, what the is this? Maybe not like that, but kind of. That's what I'm thinking, right? And so I think I just passed the threat to him and maybe he clicked it. I don't know, but he came back and said, well, you know, we can't be fighting this, right? And I'm like, well, I'm gonna, anyways, then I looked a little bit deeper, right, as I'm eating, and it was a phishing attempt. Now, I didn't click it, right, but I did forward it, and maybe had my manager click it. Now, he says he didn't click it, so we have to believe that he didn't. But every one of us, doesn't matter how good you are, you have emotion, right, and the adversary is gonna play on emotion. It's gonna get you to click that link or open that attachment. And you might be right 99% of the time. It only takes one, right, and the game is on. Taking over access to one admin account, well, I think anybody in IT realizes the impact that could cause, right? We can harm the entire company. 1.9 billion stolen passwords and usernames available on the black market. What I find very interesting here, 25% of them still work in Gmail, in a Google account. 25% of what? 1.9 billion still work. Probably Michael's account, maybe. 2018 whaling attacks, so sea-level type attacks has risen by 200%. So the bottom line is this game is tough, right? It's tough to be 100% accurate 100% of the time. And as defenders, you know, we're defending every day and blocking all of these threats, whether it's hundreds, whether it's thousands, whether it's hundreds of thousands or millions, right? Bang, bang, I'm awesome, right? I'm blocking all these threats. But honestly, nobody really cares. And I've said this many times, and I'll keep saying it. Nobody cares how many threats you block. They only care about how you react to an incident when it takes place, right? Anybody's brand, when you have a compromise, your brand is damaged when you leave that organization. Now, you might have been saying forever that this is what you need to do, and it would have mitigated that risk. But you have to now explain that when you work there when a compromise happens. So anyways, the bottom line is it's tough business and it's only getting tougher, right? So when you look at, I think, cyber skills shortage, so whoever was in not in security. Major opportunity for everybody in this room is security. Why? I think in US, right now there's 350,000 headcount open, right? Don't quote me, although I did say it, right? I might be off a little bit. And 2022, it's 3.5 million globally shortage for cybersecurity skill sets. So 3.5 million. In Canada, I just grabbed this off of, I think it was LinkedIn. I just saw it just before I was gonna come here, right? And I thought, oh, wow, 8,000 roles to fill over the next few years in Canada alone, right? And not everybody's gonna get the best security engineer, right? Or security analyst, whatever you wanna call them, because there's only a few of them gonna be out there that have been in the game for a long time. So the opportunity for new people to get into the field and get trained along the way is massive. And the market's only getting bigger because we continue to add more and more and more devices and automation into our environments, right? So this is not me. I know it kind of no, it's not me. Anyways, and then you've got this complexity, right, that exists, right? You've got all these certain security products and vendors, and everyone's promising you that if you deploy this technology, the game is over for the adversary. That's all you need. And then over time, people start saying, well, wait a minute, you need more, right? The bottom line is there's a lot of different capabilities that are required in order for you to solve the problem. And as you move along, you're gonna start building this out, but with a point product view, I don't think that you're doing yourself longer term service by taking that approach. Mind you, the industry previously has tended to take that approach because that's just kind of the way things were. So as you start building this out, you gotta ask yourself, thought I had a spelling mistake, but you have to ask yourself a couple things, right? How complex is security? So there was a couple hands in here that said that they were from networking. So just shout out, how many networking vendors do you think you can name? Could you name 10? Anybody raise their hand that can name 10? 15. Yeah, there goes the hands, right? 10 is impressive, I'd have to say, right? Who's in systems? Okay, well, nobody wants to be in systems, but that's some of the stuff we have to protect, right? But try to name 10 vendors. And again, let's name 15, right? Storage. Who's in storage? Probably nobody, right? I'm just trying to figure out who the people are that didn't raise their hand. 10 vendors, tough. 15, almost impossible, right? So the point is in security, I can honestly sit up here and say whatever I want, and nobody in this room can actually prove me wrong. Because there's that many vendors, well, not immediately. Because you're gonna have to Google it to prove that the company doesn't exist. There's that many vendors in the space. It's convoluted, it's complicated, and you as a consumer or defender have to figure this all out and piece this together, right? So it's just a very challenging job, period, right? And there's a lot of cool products out there that do a lot of really cool stuff, that's for sure. So in 2019, if you look at it, attacks were are coordinated but siloed defenses. So this is just based on the evolution of how we've defended over the years, right? 18 times the attackers, so 831 million pieces of malware, right? It's pretty good, right? How many people plug in a USB? Yeah. Yeah? Why? Because you're a security expert, right? You know what's going on, right? And I like that some people raise their hand. A lot of times people won't raise their hand and say they don't. And I can tell you, security people think, they're experts. And I think, and they are, sorry, I should say that they probably are experts. I don't want to take anything away. But a lot of times what happens is you go to a conference like this, you get this bag and you walk around, right? And what happens? You pick up all the little things that all the vendors give you, right? And you think, oh, this is awesome, but it's really not. But you pick up USB keys, right, at a lot of shows. So there was an example many years ago at a conference where they distributed USB keys, and what happened is that people went around and they distributed them in bags without people looking, right? And they went home and they wanted to figure out how many connected, right? And there was roughly 100 of them distributed. This is at a security conference, and roughly 166 actually connected back home, right? There was nothing malicious in it, but it allowed to make a call, capture the geolocation. So I've always said with security engineers, it's size that matters, right? Because if I have a 2 terabyte USB key, I bet you I'd see more hands because you're an expert and you're gonna roll up your sleeve and say, I'm not walking away from 2 terabytes, right? I know what I'm doing, right? And the game is on. So people do plug it in. It doesn't matter how good you think you are as a security expert or a security-minded individual. Again, emotion's gonna get to you at some point and you may make a wrong decision. So that's interesting for 2019. 2022, now we're starting to see more systemic automated attacks, right? So, as technology continues to grow and we get better at things, so does the adversary. And we've already seen that they're the 13th largest GDP. So they have money. It's not like they don't have money, right? They have lots of money. They go through software development life cycle. They can build really cool stuff, but they're looking at more systemic automated type attacks. And that's gonna require more systemic automated security, right? So whether you use a single product, multi-product, doesn't really matter. If you have a vision in mind, take a step back and start building towards that, right? And again, like I said, data's the big thing, right? 74 zettabytes, right? Someday we'll have a hard drive like that. You know that, right? Because I remember when I had a gigabyte drive right? Oh, wow, 1 gigabyte. Whew. Right? Who has a 1 gigabyte drive now, right? USB key that you won't plug in because you said you wouldn't plug it in, right? So what are we doing differently? So I think there's a different approach, right? Let's stop following the sheep, right? And let's think of this a little bit differently. So the point product approach, I'm gonna walk through this, right? And this is making sure that we cover everybody in the room. So some people are gonna say, I get it. That's fine. Close your eyes, you had some food, right? So there's a firewall, right? So the firewall provided stateful, L2, L3, L4, maybe type controls, depending on the firewall and how you might have deployed it. On the internet, probably L3, L4. And so you put that in place. And then over time, you've got this campus network. You've got these VLANs, and you start adding hosts, right, to those VLANs. You might have a print server. You might have a phone, right? And you might have AV on the endpoint. And this is kind of how you start, right? You start building out your environment, and you find, wait a minute, there's some content security stuff. When they go to the web, there's dangerous stuff out there, right? And so you say, well, wait a minute, I can get a proxy or some type of service that can go in and do advanced inspection on web, right? So you add that to the environment, and then you go and look and say, well, wait a minute, there's client-side attacks. Maybe there's an attack coming from the inside to the outside. I need some advanced inspection, so you add some IPS, right? How many environments look like that in the room? No? Nobody? Some? Yeah. And then you go along and you might have a DMZ because all of a sudden people want to start introducing stuff to the web, right? Your customers, let's go here, get some services, right? And you have a VLAN and you have servers, and the servers are maybe on the same VLAN. In many cases, I can tell you across the West, that's true, right? And then you put AV on those servers. You need to protect them with some type of deep inspection, so you add IPS, you don't want SQL injection or web type attacks. You might even get as far as advanced as adding a web application firewall, right, to do more of the web-based type inspection. Things are looking good, right? You've got a data center, you've got VLANs, you've got servers. And in here, you've got a firewall. How many people have a firewall between their campus and their data center? Yeah, not enough hands, right? Because that's where all your jewels are, and there's a lot of talk about zero trust and all of that stuff, right? But it's interesting to me today, even today's world, that from the campus network, I can walk right into the data center and almost do anything, right? So I would say that in lots of environments, that's an advanced capability, firewalling. Again, doing stateful inspection, L3, L4, maybe an L2 type deployment, right? You add IPS, you have WAF. I think everyone's getting the idea, right? You build that out, and things are looking pretty good, right? Yeah. But remember, the adversary's got lots of money, probably more money than you have. So they're able to walk in, so you continue to build on this. You say, well, email's the number one threat vector. Why don't we have a layer of email security? And you add that. You look at the host and you say, I need endpoint detection and response. I need advanced malware protection. How many people have EDR on the endpoint? Right? What about all the assets that can't have an agent? What about those? Right? What about the small office, home office router that's plugged in a closet somewhere? What about a printer that you can't put an agent on? Right? So again, you're going to continue to say, wait a minute, there is a gap maybe there. So you got endpoint detection response, then you start getting a little more sophisticated. You say, I need some DNS layer security. How many people centralize DNS? Both internal and external. See, there's not enough hands here. I'm starting to be sad, right? There should be more hands, right? Before an adversary can be successful, what do you think happens, right? They create some type of malware, they send it out, you click it, it goes and does a quick check probably to see if they can get to the internet, going to some safe site like Google or whatever. And then the next thing it does is it probably reaches out to either exploit kit servers or command and control type servers. Guess what that request is? That request is DNS, right? Because IPs are very easily blocked, so you don't see much of it. You still do, but you don't see much of it. So DNS is a great way of centralizing a lot of the communications that take place and an opportunity for you to block it very early on in the attack phase. But really forensically, that's one area that you can go quickly and say, okay, what does the DNS traffic look like? Cloud Access Security Broker. Now we're starting to get SaaS-based applications, and now we want some control of those disparate cloud-based applications, right? Office 365, you got Gmail, Salesforce, right? There's all kinds of these really cool apps, but they're all different. They don't all have the same levels of controls, and you may need some of that. So then you get, maybe you're that far along, you get Cloud Access Security Broker. Then you want flow analysis from the network, right? Because I can't have like my endpoint detection response, and EV isn't going to help the printers, the phones, the UPSs, and all the other IoT devices that I've added to the network. It's never going to see that. So now I say, well, I need some flow analysis, right? I want to be able to look at the behavior of the network and be able to make decisions on that. So now you add that. And it's looking really cool, I think, right? Then you get NAC. Nobody's plugging into my network, right? Without me scrutinizing it, right? Nobody's getting on. You plug in. Then you might even get as far as looking at things like software-defined access, right? So now you get into macro and micro type segmentation. Now, honestly, this is a pretty good build, right? I mean, as an adversary, there's lots of layers here for me to go through, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to go and look at probably your data center and your DMZ and say, well, why am I not doing some micro type segmentation or macro type segmentation there? And you start doing the same type of thing, right? So it looks pretty good. How many people's environments look like that? Right? So this has lots of challenges in itself because you built it along the way. But it does add a certain level of security effectiveness, right? There's no doubt about that. And so as things go on and progress, then you've got questions like decryption. You've got things like TLS 1.3 that changes the game completely in regards to the performance required for decryption. So now you say, do I turn it on the firewall? What about the network? Can I do something on the network? What about DNS, right? It gets tough because the adversary says, you don't have the resources to man in the middle everything. And do you lose visibility when the asset goes off-prem anyway? Because all that fortified environment, how many people, like your environment looks like this, and then this person comes here and connects to the Wi-Fi, and all they have is AV. And they get popped, they come back in, they plug in, you don't have any segmentation here. It does a CNC call back out, uses port 80, most likely 443, because they know, again, decryption is going to be a heavy payload, and you have to decrypt a lot, especially in TLS 1.3, and they go out and they're actually bypassed all the security elements that you just built, right? So that control should be considered to move forward with that asset no matter where they are, and there's some complexity there. Application segmentation, private, public, and hybrid cloud, database security, vulnerability scanning, mobility, right? Like I said, assets are coming in and off prem, right? They're on-prem, they go off-prem, they come in, on-prem, off, and on, off, right? You got SIM. So anyways, it's complicated. And then on top of all of that, once you finally get this built out, you got to start asking questions. If my endpoint knows about it, does my firewall know about it? Does my firewall know about it? Does my email security device know about it, right? You need to share that intelligence. When you know something's bad, you want systemically to send those controls further upstream, right? As much as possible. Integration, how do they work together? And this is where everybody's at. If you might not have some of the pieces, but this is where everyone's kind of sitting at now. Systemic response. How can I respond quickly, right? And then it's time to renew. And what do you guys do? It's firewall time. Woohoo, we got an old L3, L4 type stateful firewall, and what do you guys do? You go buy a firewall, right? At least the ones that are in security or networking maybe, right? And so you go buy that firewall, and what you do is say, wow, it's got a whole bunch of cool features, and you plug it in. And you probably do this very quickly. Now, some of you might take a step back and think about this a little more holistically, but a lot of times what I find is you've got a renewal coming up, it's budget crunch, you got to spend the last bit of dollars, whatever, right? So you move fast and you make a decision, you buy a firewall. Next gen, everybody that knows me knows I have a big problem with that label, right? Because it never expires. But next gen firewall you put in place, right? Then you get this idea that you've got smart meters and smart ceilings and all these smart devices that you can plug into your network. And people are plugging them in sometimes that you don't even know, right? If you go to a field location, you can probably see a TV that has Netflix that's plugged into a wired port, right? Well, that's new attack surface, right? And then so what happens is you quickly try to adapt that and things just start to break. Upgrade products, add new products. It's a tough game, right? And now it's hard enough to put controls in place that could impact the user. Imagine putting controls in place that impact the user and you get an outage or something's broken, right? It's never a great experience and it's tough. So from an architecture perspective, what you want to do is you want to understand the executive drivers. So this could be a variety of different things, right? So when you're going through this in your own environment, take a step back and say, what are our goals, right? What are some of the mandates that we have? And it could be all kinds of things from compliance to simplification of the security stack. You might want to reduce time to detection, so better threat intelligence consumption, right? Sharing that information. Reduce the number of vendors, right? There's complexity there. Whether you're one vendor, 15 vendors, 20 vendors, it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of complexity, right? Every time you upgrade product, things could break, right? Even if they're open standard, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's gonna work. And vendors have their own motivation. So protected SaaS-based applications. So I wanna make sure that I offer cloud-based services to my customer. And my customer means my employees, right, that work at this company. I wanna be able to empower them to work off-premise and go through an encrypted channel like TLS 1.2 or 1.3 without having to use VPN and some of the older clunky type technologies. Increase automated response, so reduce the time to respond. Right? If a printer is talking outbound to something malicious, that's fine. A firewall could have the intelligence to block it, but I want to shut down that port, or I want to isolate that host. Right? I want that to happen automatically. And then what happens is I get an alert. My team doesn't have to get up in the middle of the night and go chase that down. We'll deal with it in the morning because we've secured that threat. Simplified endpoint protection for advanced threat. So things like I want to be able to empower my users to do more or have more flexibility off-prem and accessing resources in the environment. But in order to do that, I want to make sure that those assets are protected as much as I can protect them when they're off-premise, right? And that's the biggest challenge. The inside the environment, there's lots of stuff and technology that you can add. As you start having assets move off-prem, that's where things get a little dicey, right? And so whatever your executive drivers might be, I've translated these a little bit, but you want to write them down, right? You want a good idea of what those executive drivers are. And then from there, you're going to identify threats and risks to the business, right? So what are some of them? Well, customer data being breached, right? Stolen passwords, usernames, et cetera, right? Lack of visibility, right? If there's an incident, I want as much, remember, that's what you're gonna be remembered for. Not all the threats that you block. You're gonna be remembered for how you handled the breach, right? And the last thing you wanna do, and we've happened to have a trend of this over the years, is that as an incident is happening, we tell stakeholders this is how many things that we think's gone bad. We go back, we do more analysis, we come back, and that number increases, right? And they go back and tell people, and then we go back, it's actually this, right? And that stakeholder has to go back and say, it's 100,000. No, it's 500,000. No, it's 2.5 million, right? You don't want to go in that direction. You want to be able to move in that direction. We think maybe, well, you don't want to have to move at all, right? You want some good data, but if you don't, you want to say, it's 100,000, no, it's 1,000, no, it's 5 people, right? Risk of compromised assets off the network, IoT devices, service impact due to breach, right? So if you take down a website, it's e-commerce, it's near Christmas time, 70% of your revenue happens at that time, right? You need those services up, right? Taking those down could actually have a loss for the business for the entire year, even though it's a small period of time. And much more, right? And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna look at this big, complicated environment, and you're gonna identify all the technologies that you have in play. So you're gonna wanna know that, I got this vendor for AV, I've got this for endpoint detection response, I've got this for firewall, I just kind of outline this. Because this is going to help identify the gaps that you have in the environment, right? Because you might have some really cool stuff. So when we go through the walkthrough, right, I got this off Wiki, right? That's the CEO, right? Acme Corporation. It's interesting because I didn't know this. No, wait a minute. How many people know Wile E. Coyote? I'm just wondering. Yeah, now all hands almost go up. That's interesting, right? But anyways, those days I think are over. But I know everything went wrong whenever he touched stuff, but I didn't know they actually made product that was failure pro. I just thought he was an idiot, right? But actually the products were faulty, and it's more a manufacturing and quality control than Wiley's problem, right? But anyways, you've got a company. We want to understand the company a little bit before we move forward, right? So what you're gonna do, or the best way to kind of tackle this, and again, you can always take this and add your flavor to it. But what I wanna do is say, here's an individual, and that individual's IT, HR, whatever. And they need to get to the internet, and I need to understand the security elements required in order to secure that flow. Take a step back. It's not about a firewall. It's not about an endpoint. It's about looking at it holistically and finding out what is it required to secure that flow. And as you go through, you'll do that for other areas, contractors, maybe to one data center service, right? You have a light bulb, has access to a building management system, right? When you take this approach, it changes the game a little bit, right? You're not reacting to, I need to replace a firewall, endpoint, whatever it is. You're looking at this as what is actually required. Where do I feel comfortable that I have enough controls in place that now I feel that flow is as secure as that is acceptable to the organization, right? So when you do that, we're gonna walk through this, right? And I wanted to really do this interactively, but I thought it's really hard because it's PowerPoint and I already have the icons up. And if you get it wrong, right, then I'm gonna show the wrong icon, but we're gonna try, okay? So you have an admin flow on-premise. So this is an IT admin maybe, right? They're on-premise, they're connected to the internet. Has anybody thought of securing the environment in that manner? Or do you think, we've got these controls, somebody said we have to have a firewall, we put in a firewall. I've read the web application firewall helps protect this, so I put that in, right? There's a new widget, here's this EDR term, everyone's jumping on it, right? Let's add EDR. And that's kind of the approach we take, unfortunately, right? So what you want to do is understand the capabilities that are currently addressed. Partially addressed, so that actually means you've got a technology that you've either not fully deployed or it's sitting on a shelf because you bought it last year at end of budget cycle, right? I got to spend that money and it's still sitting there, you haven't deployed it. But you own it, right? It's just a matter of execution now. And then capability is not addressed, meaning that you haven't done anything with it yet. Excited? Yeah? That doesn't feel like it. Okay, so admin employee to the internet. What do I need? Anybody? One person? One person in security? What? A what? A use case, that is the use case. Whatever, they could be surfing the internet as an employee that has work-life balance. It could be somebody reaching out to a vendor site because they're doing some research. But they're using the internet and they're going outbound. Anybody? Lots of stuff. I know you guys know this. Come on. So I'll do it for you, okay? I'll do all the heavy working. You're probably going to have some AV, right? Woohoo! That's it. That's all we need, right? Depends on who you talk to. That might be all you need, or at least that's the claim. You probably have a firewall, right? How many people have a firewall? How many people have an L7 firewall? Yeah, a little less, right? So if you have, a next generation firewall, again using that term, you might have some application control, right? You might have IPS. You might have URL filtering, right? And again, we're not looking at this, and I made a mistake there by saying next-gen firewall, because that's not the way you want to go about this exercise. This is about capabilities required to secure the flow. We'll determine what the products are, or technology stack, that you're going to leverage to meet that requirement, right? So you've got some URL filtering. Maybe you've got active vulnerability scanning. I had to fill in a little bit of this to get started, or else I can't get through the deck, right? You might even have enough as some SIM and some logging and reporting, right? Now what you want to do is think like an auditor. Who's an auditor in the room? Compliance, risk. Nobody? Oh, okay. You probably don't want to stay up here with me, because I know how the rest of the room feels. And if you're staying up here with me, there's not much I can do, really. But and then hacker, right? Or some type of an adversary, and get over the hoodie or the hat or whatever you want. I don't care, right? I'd look like that if I could every day, right? So anyway, so then you want to start asking yourself some questions, right? Is this enough? And as a team, and the best way of doing this is having help desk, maybe even procurement in the room, right? You can get all types of IT groups, because everybody's going to add value to the conversation. Risk, right? Have them in the room. First question, maybe, right? Again, this depends on the organization and what we're trying to secure. Should I be able to connect to any asset to get access to the wired network? Now, I think most environments I can probably plug in and get access, right? And if I can, there's some risk maybe associated to that. So maybe what I want to do is I want to authorize and authenticate the devices before they get on the network, right? Looking good. Do I understand the type and state of the asset? Okay, so if you authenticate an asset, that's great, but if somebody's jumped on Kali Linux and did 802.1x and got on the network, is that good? No, right? Maybe you don't want that operating system on there, right? Maybe you want to make sure that that device actually meets a minimum requirement. And so maybe you add device profiling and posture, and then you might say, well, wait a minute, now that I know some context about the assets connecting to my environment, what can I do to ensure that they have access to the resources they need, but minimize the risk to the company? Right? So maybe I need some dynamic control. So I add some software-defined access, segmentation, etc. Right? So it's looking pretty good, right? Who's feeling good about this? Right? Well, somebody should. Yeah, you. All right. Okay, so what about DNS security? There's value in that, right? Whether you're on or off-prem is to centralize especially all recursive DNS. So anything leaving the organization, you want to have a record of that. So you add some recursive DNS capabilities. Do I need flow analytics? Do I care that this asset used to talk to me and went to the internet, and then all of a sudden it went to the internet and started talking laterally? Would that be interesting? Right? Now this flow is to the internet, but that's something that would be interesting if the machine got popped and the behavior of that asset changes, maybe the network can identify that. And when I say maybe, it could, right? You certainly can. So I add some flow analytics. What about network-based malware detection? Now, we could say the endpoint has advanced malware protection. And this is why it makes things interesting, because if I take out admin and put printer there, I can't put an agent on that. So maybe network malware protection is key, right? To protecting not only endpoints that are traditional OS, right, that users use, but also other assets that are connected to the network. And what's interesting here is that somebody might say, okay, well, you have malware protection here, why would I need it on the endpoint? Because nothing's 100%. I'm a big believer that in order to defend, you want to defend as far away from the asset as possible. You do not want to rely on what's on the endpoint, ever, right? Because if you only rely on the endpoint, you have to be 100% right every single time. You have no opportunity to block the threat farthest away from the asset as possible. Okay, so now we've got some endpoint detection response malware. This is looking really good. Passive VA scanning. So that could be, now you have active, which is much better, but passive VA scanning could give you some insight into what the asset might be running from application OS and the vulnerabilities associated with it. And then you can start giving your alerts a certain level, right? So alert 1, this is really bad. Alert 4, go back to bed, maybe, right? But now you can start classifying, because an attack comes in and hits a Linux server, right? And the attack is actually based on Windows. I don't care. I want it logged. I'd prefer it being stopped, but I really don't care because it'd never be realized, right? So you want some of that maybe capability. So we add passive, then you got TLS inspection. So you add SSL decryption, even though it's TLS decryption, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go through and say, okay, I got this product and this product, half blown, and then a bunch of red capabilities, and then you build out that flow. Once you build out 1 or 2 or 3 flows, then it becomes cookie cutter. But when you're presenting this to leaders, right, instead of a bomb, I need this, right? This is more compelling, right? Wait a minute, there's a lot of red here. Why is there a lot of red here? Well, this is what we believe is required to secure the environment. And then what we can do is say, these are some of the technologies that help us achieve these outcomes, right? But then there's still questions here, right? How do they integrate with each other? How can I get some of that systemic capability? The adversary is moving to systemic type attacks. How do I get that capability? So you want to ask yourself some of those questions, right? So how do I share intelligence? How supported is the integration? Did I get systemic response? How much complexity did I add? And again, during this phase, you might build this out, and there still might be point product stuff that you need to buy along the way because you're not ready or you haven't finished this. But once you get this done, now you have a blueprint. And now it's much easier to go to the vendors because you have a game plan in mind, right? You can say, hey, how do you achieve this? Where do we integrate? What types of openness do you have or don't have? What is the value of your integrated solution stack? Or maybe you have a better independent point product view with some orchestration, whatever it is, right? Now you have something that you can achieve. And so what you'll do is you'll do this for other flows, external contractor to a jump server, right? Because we don't want the external contractor going right to the service. We want them to jump, right? And so you might have, remote access VPN, logging and reporting, endpoint antivirus on the jump server. Remember, this is a contractor, so you don't own the asset. But you might want to posture them. You might want to identify the asset. You might want to make sure that they have some dynamic control. So if they do get compromised or there's some change in the behavior of that asset, it's communicating or trying to communicate with services it shouldn't, I want to dynamically move that asset back off of the VPN, right? And maybe into a restricted area. Do I need a firewall? The short answer is absolutely, right? And then the other thing is, do I need things like two-factor, 2FA, right? Most likely, remember, phishing and compromised credentials, right? Still number 1. And just because you do 2FA at VPN, you still might want it on the jump server that they're logging into, right? Layers matter. Do I need advanced inspection? So I think everybody gets the idea, right? No? Yeah? And you start building this out, very similar type questions. You've got your gaps. What are the technologies that can help you solve that problem? Right? And you continue that process for all the major flows. You're going to always have a subset of technologies that may be required that are different in certain flows, right? But if you get all your major ones done, most likely that control that you put in place is going to apply to a lot of the other flows as well, right? Integration, and then same thing, some of the questions. How do I share intelligence, integration, systemic response, and complexity, right? Complexity has always been the real adversary of security or defending, right? It's a complex game, and part of it is the vendor space. They see a huge market, everybody's jumping in, and they're creating the next go-to product. And you guys are trying to keep up with all these different technologies and building out solution stacks and making it work. And everybody promises, that all you do is get our stuff and the world has been solved from a security perspective. And then you're going to continue going through this cycle, right? So I think everybody gets that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go through and prioritize the gaps. So you're going to list how many capabilities that you might be missing, what are the security capability, the missing capability, and any notes that you might have. Maybe you'll create a matrix. I like to create a matrix, right? I'd like to visually see. I don't want to see the green stuff, right? That stuff's working. I want to see the stuff that we're not doing. So again, when I'm talking to stakeholders, I'm saying, look, we've got a problem. And see, this is an exercise that you go through. That looks bad, doesn't it? I mean, red's bad, right? Looks bad to me. So lots of opportunities. And then you'll have some specific recommendations. I need a next-gen firewall that's already in place. I'm going to start adding more features, right? They're feature-rich. Now, just because you can do a feature doesn't mean you're good at it. Right? That doesn't mean you're good at it. It just means you have a feature, right? But you might have a capability that all you have to do is just leverage it or turn it on, spend some time, and then you can start filling in some of those gaps. Even better is prioritize this based on ease. Maybe DNS and doing something like recursive DNS security is a quick win. So why don't we add that right away and give ourselves a couple green boxes? Because to roll out something like NAC is going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time. Right? It's not easy to roll it out all the way up to something like software-defined access, right? You got lots of stakeholders involved. You got to talk to a lot of people and build that out. So maybe that moves further down the list, right? And then that's looking at it more holistically, right? I like to think of things like holistic detection and response, not endpoint detection and response. It's not enough. I like to look at architecture, not point product. Again, I don't care the products necessarily that you buy to build it out, but I want people to start thinking in that manner because I think long-term it'll serve you much better than what the industry has done up to now. And again, remember the beginning, it said all of those stats. Well, all those stats are based on everything we've done up to this point. So does it work? I like to think it doesn't, right? So maybe we need to change it. So that's it. I think in perfect time, like 1 minute. Yeah. Do we do questions or just hand over? Any questions or no? Who's thinking architecture now though? Oh, I love you guys. That's all that matters.
So I'll be that guy, and this is my second question of the day. Thank you, Jason, for the wonderful, hi, over here, waving at you.
Wherever you are.
Go left. God, is that you? No, I'm kidding.
Oh.
This was fantastic. I love the architecture ideas. I would love your advice from the vendor space. What are you seeing out there in the world? Because you're talking about answering questions like what are the problem we're trying to solve. You're talking about people making risk-based decisions. But are you seeing that actually resonate in the vendor space? Are CSOs still coming to you and saying, I want a blinky box to solve all my problems? Is this actually happening in practice, I guess is my question, and if not, what do we as the tactical people on the floor need to do to help get it there?
Yeah, so if I heard everything, the short answer, large organizations are absolutely now starting to think of architecture. So that definitely is starting to happen, and those questions are being asked. In regards to vendors, there's a lot of product out there. There's open standards. People are trying to find like sticks and taxis, a way of sharing intelligence, for example. But again, you got to look in the weeds. Some of the things that are being introduced out there may not be all what they seem to be. So you just have to do your analysis, find a partner that you trust, and work with that partner to come up with a solution stack that meets your requirement. But if you do take the step back and look at it from an architectural perspective, it's not about the blinky lights now. It's about here's the capability we require. Now what is the blinky light that could solve the problem? As opposed to here's the blinky light, we do this really cool stuff. Yeah. Cool. All right, go for break or something. I don't know.
I have a question. I like your presentation. It was really, really informative. I just want to know how can I get my hands on that presentation?
Well, I'm taking I think I'm going to give, I don't know where Harv and Michael, I'm going to convert it to PDF so you won't get the animation, but maybe I'll keep it, I don't know. And I'll submit it to wherever these guys have a repository and you guys will get it. Yeah. Oh, go. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, so a few people have actually asked that. It's not something we accounted for yet, so the answer is we'll figure that out. But if it goes the way I expect it will, the committee will reach out to all the speakers after this and just say, hey, are you willing to share your deck? We'll share it, and then when you signed up, you all have an email address, so we'll probably just BCC a link to all the talks, whoever wants to give them out.